Welcome to Eastlake. We are an inclusive faith community dedicated to the free search for truth and meaning, seeking to live out a more just and life-giving spirituality in the modern world. We see faith as less about doctrines and dogmas demanding total agreement, but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others. What unites us is a growing awareness that life is a gift and love is the point. We welcome the entire human family, regardless of race, age, creed, physical abilities, marital or economic status, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So if you are curious and have come to see, if you are tired and have come to rest, if you are grateful and have come to share, if you are journeying and have come to grow, if you are wounded and have come to heal, if you are joyful and have come to shine, welcome home. Today, we hear from Kent Dobson as he continues our series, Yes, but What About Jesus? Please check the description for links to our quarterly Spotify playlist and guided meditation.
All right, let's begin with a quotation. What if you gained the whole world? What if you gained the whole world? Power, prestige, profit, privilege, economic security, fame, political influence. What if you gained the whole world and forfeited your soul? What can you give in exchange for your soul? This is a line from Jesus. And of course, it's worth asking, what did Jesus mean by soul? And I don't think that's so easy to answer. The word is psyche, so that's interesting in and of itself. But maybe he meant something like the essence of who you are, the thread that goes deep into your being, beneath your name and your persona and your identity and your ego and your accomplishments and the stories that have shaped you, something beneath that. The thing you're meant to carry into the world and be in the world. What if you lost that? In other words, what if you had everything and were somehow disconnected from the deep source of who you are? And I hear this quotation and I think, yep, Jesus matters. The symbolic Christ, the mystical Christ, the Jesus behind the many projections that we place on him. There's something of that Christ that I think is still relevant and needed and necessary and worth listening to. In that sense, the symbolic Christ is provocative and challenging. And he's not like your buddy. He's not boyfriend Jesus that you sing pleasant songs to, or, even hippie liberal Jesus, or some kind of like, cog in the salvation machine that somehow magically takes you to heaven. Set all those aside and just hear, what if you gained the whole world and lost your soul? I mean, I can't think of a more pressing and important question in a culture gone mad after power, prestige, and possessions and fame. A world gone mad around jockeying for position and us versus them and groups and camps and hierarchies and one-upmanships and what if you had all that and didn't know who you were? You see, in that sense, I think Jesus matters, and that's what I want to do. That's what I've been doing in this series. So you're joining. If you're just joining us today, you're in the middle of a 3-week series here at Eastlake around the person and the symbol of Christ, which I called Yes, but What About Jesus? And I got that title really from my experience here at Eastlake. So my name's Kent Dobson. I live in Ada, Michigan. I've been a part of the greater Eastlake community for 5 years or so, teaching at East Lake and leading retreats and getting to know people and the staff and whatnot, which has been a great joy in my life. And some of my own departure from mainstream evangelical Christianity was done in public, and some of it was done at East Lake. Ryan Meeks and I have that in common, sort of our evolution. Some of it chosen, some of it not, has happened in public. And many of you at East Lake were saying something like, hey, we're with you. Like, to quote Rilke, I live my life in widening circles that move out across the world. And I also heard, yeah, we're with you, but what about Jesus? What do you do with Jesus? Is there a way of reading him now in the 21st century that's interesting? And I think that's a worthwhile question. In fact, Carl Jung says that symbols, even the big ones, like Christ or the cross or something, and pick your others from other religions, even great symbols can lose their power. And that's a profound observation. And I think it relates to the person of Jesus, because in some respects we can say Christianity is losing its power. And it's fractured and falling apart, and in some ways it's like a Christianity of your own making. and that begs the question, what is the symbol behind all that losing its power? And as far as I can tell, maybe the answer is I don't know, who am I to say? But as far as I can tell at this point, the answer is no. And in fact, I think looking again at the person of Jesus from a symbolic point of view is worth our time. And that's why I want to do a 3-week series on it. In fact, I just released an audiobook called A Grain of Wheat, the Christ symbol, which is trying to do the same thing. Look at the life of Jesus symbolically. And you can see, listen to last week's talk if you missed it, as a way of introducing the question. But one of the things that I said last week is that, in my mind, something of a pattern emerged from looking at the life of Jesus. And I see the life of Jesus in 7 stages. And each of those stages has a kind of symbol associated with it. And last week I wanted to talk about the symbol of calling, which is what I call stage 2. Stage 2 in a life transformed. And I like looking at Jesus this way because it seems fresh and interesting on one level, but also it communicates something, that whatever we mean by transformation is a process. It's not a one-time lightning bolt, although sometimes profound experiences can happen. It's an ongoing and unfolding process. And if you look at Jesus's life that way, a life transformed, it gives us a clue as to what is the nature of transformation like, and what is it that Jesus is inviting us to undergo, not believe. I need to believe these 5 things about Jesus, but rather, actually much more frighteningly, what do I need to undergo, to pass through? It's like being worked on by something, by a process. And so I think reading Jesus's life symbolically like this is necessary and needed in the Western world that, for better or worse, has been shaped by Christianity and by stories from the Bible and by this peasant figure from an obscure part of the Roman Empire. So that's what I want to do today, and then next week as well. And maybe I want to say also, before I get into some content, I want to say how grateful I am to be a part of East Lake, which is on the cutting edge. I don't even like that. It's a bit of a cliche. Out on the borders of, or the frontiers of, a spiritual community. What does a modern spiritual community look like in the 21st century? And in this crazy world that we live in, where we're connecting in all these unforeseen ways, like right now over the internet. But more importantly, what does a spiritual community look like that's working for good in the world, and that's open and willing to wrestle with the big questions and not just sort of circle the wagons around the tried and true doctrines or ideologies? It's a scary place to be, but it's also like really exciting and enlivening and rich. And I'm just grateful to be a part of that and to join all of you sort of out on the frontiers. And yeah, so maybe that's as much as I want to say about that right now. And let's get into the story. So last week I talked about the symbol of calling, which I see in the phrase, I have to be in my Father's house. So I don't want to repeat the talk. Go back and listen to it. Today I want to talk about maybe two stages and looking at Jesus's life symbolically. One I'm going to call Transcendence, and the other I'm going to call Wilderness, and they're related in some ways. They seem to follow one another. And just as kind of a cursory overview, let's review some things about the life of Jesus. So according to the Gospels, he grows up in Nazareth, and his family is in the building business. They're tektons, that's the word in Greek. They're builders. They're really day laborers, most likely. And they live in a small village, and they're heading into town to try to seek work, maybe each day even, working on projects for whoever had the power and the money and the influence to be building things. That's the family he comes from. And they're not well known. They're not of some sort of privileged descent like priests. They don't seem to come from any kind of money, because in the ancient world, they're just the haves and have-nots, as if it's any different now. And in any case, Jesus begins to feel this calling at age 12. I have to be in my Father's house. That in some ways, like, the image is that he's an orphan. And he's connected to a father, and that's a metaphor, the divine, that seems to be beckoning him out beyond the container of his family and his tribe and his group. But he goes back home, and he, just lives his life and doesn't seem to take risks for quite some time until about the age of 30. And here's where we just don't have very much information, but something begins to stir in him, and the pull becomes so undeniable that he leaves home. And he begins to follow his cousin around, John the Baptist, who's kind of like a wild man, beard, and eats bugs and yells and screams and is apocalyptic and dunks people in the water and lives out in the desert. He's kind of like a guru, a mentor, maybe just even better, a kind of wild man. And this wakes Jesus up, we could say. And he goes down to the river one day to be baptized, to undergo this ritual, this ceremony, this rite of passage. And maybe it's worth saying a baptism that it's connected to the entire story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt, wandering in the wilderness, and passing through the Jordan River and coming out the other side. In other words, leaving kind of a land of slavery and lostness and wilderness and entering what would later be called the Promised Land. But if you just take that as an image, that's what's being recapitulated down on the shores of the Jordan River with John the Baptist. He's saying, leave that old world. And maybe in psycho-spiritual terms, we could say the first half of life, who you think you are, your identity, your name, your position, or your lack thereof. Leave it all, because what's it? We know that all kinds of people are attracted to John the Baptist. It's not just like, the educated. It's the educated and the uneducated, the rich and the poor. Even soldiers are coming down. Anyway, leave all that stuff and die. Be drowned in the river of life and come out the other side. That's the ritual. And, we've lost our taste for these things, which is why I lead wilderness retreats, because ceremony in wild places, any kind of ceremony, doesn't even have to be in a wild place, is something the soul craves. It helps point the direction, and it's something that's physical, psychosomatic. It involves the entire body. It's not just like an intellectual thing, like I'm just gonna believe in leaving one world and entering another. No, it's something like get dunked, be drowned in the river, die. Feel the rush of 40-degree water just flowing over your body, immersing you. We know from Jewish mikvah rituals, which was their ceremonial baths that they took for ceremonial reasons to be clean in the synagogue and the temple, was done in the nude, which I think is just it's kind of wild and provocative and vulnerable. So imagine Jesus is down there and he enters the water and he comes out, and the text says that he hears a voice. This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Now let's leave aside kind of Trinitarian language, if you're familiar with that, sort of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, like making theological claims about that. Let's just leave it aside for a second. A voice, a whisper, an internal nudge. You are my son. You belong. You matter. And kind of this being the Son of God, I know now we take to be extra special, but even David is called the Son of God in the Hebrew Bible. So it's much more of like God, the divine, the mystery, that's my word for it, an experience of being the child, the son or the daughter of. I belong, I matter, I'm not an accident amidst other accidents, to quote David White. So imagine feeling that. And going back to the initial story, wanting to be in my Father's house, leave his parents at age 12 and sit in the temple among the rabbis, this kind of feeling of being orphaned. And all of a sudden there's a grabbing that says, you belong, you're my son. I love you. I'm pleased with you. And he comes out of the water and experiences this. And it's like the Spirit, the wind is all that means. The pneuma, the wind, is stirring in him. And we could say he's not the same. What is he experiencing? He's experiencing a moment of transcendence. And transcendence might sound a little fancy, but I really don't mean it that way. Let's take it in its most simple definition. To transcend, as I'm using it here, means to move beyond your ordinary experience. To put it in psychological terms, to transcend your egoic state. And all I mean by ego is your conscious awareness of who you think you are. So maybe something of a map is helpful. So you have your persona, that's your mask, that's all that means, the mask, that's the face you show the world, that's your Facebook profile, okay? Your Instagram, here I am, that's persona, 100% persona. It's just a mask, that's all it is. And beneath the mask, you have your ego, who you think you are, the conscious self. Even the conscious self that says, let's take a selfie and show the world the mask we want to show. That's the ego. But in terms of consciousness, that's the tip of the iceberg. And profound experiences like love, like suffering, like getting dunked in a river, you fill in the blank, crack that egoic persona wide open. And it's something like you descend or broaden out or break out just for a moment of transcendence. And the feeling is that maybe twofold. I am more than the I that that um, that I experience. I'm more than my conscious awareness, and the world is more than the frame that I've put around it. You transcend, and you can think about it either way, as rising above or rising below. It doesn't matter, but you break out. And what I'm saying is that human beings, I was going to say wired, but I really don't like that as a metaphor. I'm trying to resist mechanical and technological metaphors for human beings. We're not wired, but maybe we could say being fully human means that we have the capacity for transcendence. We have the capacity to transcend our own egos. We have the capacity to transcend our own egoic states. And when we do, it's like divine encounter. It's like a cracking open. It's like I'm loved and I didn't know it. I belong and I didn't know it. And it's as if the wind of the divine, of love, of life rushes in and melts us. It can also be a bit terrifying because our ego, who we think we are, is so committed to its story. And who wants to be broken open? Like W.H. Auden says, we would rather be ruined than changed. We'd rather die in our illusions than be changed, because to be changed is to have that thing cracked. And Jesus had his world, his 30-year-old builder, carpenter. Maybe he was really good at the Torah. Maybe his mom really liked him and thought he was a good boy. And that cracked. And it gave him a sense of, okay, my life is not about me. My life is not about me. And something of an aim might be emerging. If this is true, and I belong, and I'm the son of the divine, what is mine to carry in the world? Those are the following questions. And I want to say something about transcendence too, is that, and this is true I think in all spiritual traditions that I'm aware of, they're moments, they're states of consciousness. It's not that one experiences transcendence and can live in that state. No, human beings are more complicated than that. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been on a retreat and then, maybe something amazing happened to you. And not to just praise retreats, it could be anything at all. You could have been on your meditation pillow and you felt that oneness, and it kind of left you almost in a post-dream state of, man, what is life? Life is so much bigger than I thought. And then in comes your kid barreling through the door, where's my mask? And I'm out of gas. Can I have gas money? Or your spouse says, I told you to take the trash out. And you're just like, I was meditating, I was having a moment of transcendence. See, so life is complicated. And I don't even think we're meant to live in this kind of perpetual state of transcendence. No, it's a taste. It's one taste. And it matters. But our feet still are on the ground of the ordinary. And we're still likely to get hijacked by subpersonalities and complexes and coping strategies and all that kind of stuff. But transcendence begins to broaden our world, help us live our life in widening circles that move out across the world. And I think another thing that might be important to say here is that what follows this moment of transcendence, which I think cracks Jesus's life open, is wilderness. The very next line is that the Spirit, the same wind, so the wind that blew in for this moment of transcendence, the same wind, the Spirit, drives Jesus out into the wilderness to be tempted. Now, why are those things back to back? I mean, you would think just live now, just enlighten, just walk around on a cloud, just like welcoming people and nodding to people and saying you're special and you belong, and just, no, now it's time to do some work. So you've had one taste. So Your ego is broken. At least it's cracked, we could say. And so now let's do some work. Let's do some work that only can be done in the wilderness, where human beings don't live on bread alone, on the work of their hands, but it's austere, it's solid, it's solitude at its finest, it's stillness and silence. Then you get to find out what's in there. And of course, in the wilderness story, Jesus is tempted. He's tempted by power and possessions and prestige and do little magic tricks and change stones to bread and jump from high buildings and gain fame and notoriety. Do you see how these are connected? Transcendence and temptation, transcending who we think we are in a moment of union and oneness and facing the devil that's within, back to back. So maybe we can say something like, transcendence matters and it's part of the spiritual journey, and it's likely to drive you into the wilderness to do some real work. And otherwise, to use a fancy word, we do something that spiritual teachers call spiritual bypassing. We take our moments of transcendence, we cling to them like greedy little consumers, and we think we can go around the hard work of our childhood wounds and our coping strategies and our temptations. I'll just go around it, but it doesn't seem to work that way. So what can we offer in light of some of these things that we're saying? Maybe just to reiterate, a life transformed in these stages. Today, I'm pointing out that transcendence is part of the journey. It's likely to happen unto you, and so is wilderness, to be driven out. And this is part of what shapes us. To come back to the opening line, helps us recover and uncover that soul thread that we don't want to lose. What if you gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? Well, maybe you need transcendence in wilderness so that you're not chasing after the wind here. So maybe in conclusion, I want to offer a couple of questions and suggestions. The first is this: how do you make transcendence happen? Get ready, get out a pen, write this down. This is the way to do it. How do you make transcendence happen? You don't. To quote James Finley, you cannot make the moment of oceanic oneness happen. You cannot make it. I wish you could. I'd be a multimillionaire. I'd be on Oprah. Come to my program and you will experience divine awakening. No, you can't make it happen. But James Finley, by the way, was studied with Thomas Merton in the monastery. And if you don't know who Thomas Merton is, don't worry about it or Google it. James Finley says this: you can offer a stance of least resistance. So you cannot make the moment of transcendence happen, but you can offer a stance of least resistance. That's all meditation is. That's all sitting in silence is. That's all contemplation is, offering a stance of least resistance. That's all wandering down to the water and submitting and surrendering to the flow of water in baptism, or to the wilderness itself, to fasting and solitude, just letting it happen, offering a stance of least resistance. Instead of that clingy, egoic way of saying, I gotta make this happen. There's a kind of irony. The moment you say, it's over, sometimes that's the moment where things happen. So maybe you can ask yourself this week, how can I offer a stance of least resistance to moments I can't make happen? Maybe to life itself. How can I offer a stance of least resistance to be that humble in the world? God, we need that. God, I need that. To be that humble in the world. To say, I am no spiritual expert, but to walk humbly, to walk low to the earth, maybe. And what's the second question? Maybe it's this, the second thing I want to say here in conclusion is, if you find yourself, on the one hand, your world breaking open, and on the other hand, all kinds of crap coming up that you feel like that needs work, know that that's the way it is. And it's a powerful and courageous act to say yes to the wilderness, to walk out and to wander for a time and for a season, for days, or 40 days and 40 nights, to use the symbol in the Jesus story. It's courageous to say, all right, I've got some work to do. And there's no other way to uncover the soul's gifts than to work with your wounds. And God, I wish it was a different way. But all the great myths, stories, and legends say there's a connection and a relationship between your wounds and your gifts. And it's that desert time. So you've had moments of transcendence possibly, and they may be very subtle. I mean, I probably didn't say that before. I know it sounds dramatic. The sky is open. You're my son, Oftentimes, moments of transcendence are very, very, very subtle. And they're often followed by an invitation into the wilderness. Okay, so let's do some work here. So maybe just I want to encourage you. If you're in that spot, say yes to it. Our culture, as you know, offers an infinite number of distractions to talk you out of it. Don't listen. Don't listen. Say yes to mysteries, pressure on your life, wanting to turn over the soil a bit. So maybe you heard a word, a phrase, a hint, a guess, a clue that you can ponder and work with and carry with you like a little seed. Put it in your pouch and carry it with you like a seed and let it do its work this week. I want to thank you for listening. I mean, it's a lot to ask to take 30 minutes of your day to listen, to open your ears. So thank you. I mean that sincerely. And I look forward to next week. I can't wait till next week, where I want to kind of make some concluding thoughts about this 3-week series. Peace, grace, love, wildness, wilderness, transcendence. I wish all these things upon you, including your own drowning and your own resurrection. So I'll see you next week. Peace.